Hello and welcome to Let's Talk Fundraising, the official podcast from the Chartered Institute of Fundraising, the charity that champions a lifetime of impact, a career in fundraising. From your very first fundraising role to decades of experience in the sector, this is the podcast that gets into the conversations that really matter, the challenges, the opportunities, and everything in between. I'm Tim Beynon, and every month I'm joined by a guest co-host and some fantastic voices from across the fundraising world to dig into what's really going on in our sector right now. And in the co-host chair with me for this episode, I'm delighted to welcome back Charlotte Sherman, Policy Manager at the Chartered Institute of Fundraising. Charlotte has been leading on the Institute's Philanthropy 2035 project. Right now, there is a unique opportunity to grow philanthropy in the UK. Renewed government focus on how to encourage and enable high net worth individuals, coupled with changing donor behaviours and spurred on by demographic and technological developments, have opened up opportunities for charities to strengthen and expand their major giving programmes. So there's lots to talk about. Charlotte, great to see you again. How are you?
Excellent to be here, as always.
So before we meet our guest today, tell us a bit more about Philanthropy 2035. Looking ahead 10 years, when who knows what might happen, is a bold move, especially considering what's happened over the last 10 years.
Philanthropy 2035 is an ambitious work stream, which we started in 2025. When we recognised that there was this kind of growing interest in encouraging more high net worths to give, we thought, right, well, it's time that we actually start highlighting some of the expectations that charities have. So we went to members with a simple question that has a very complex answer. What do charities want philanthropy to look like in 10 years? And what are the steps to get there? Since then, we have launched the Philanthropy 2035 hub on our website that has the latest policy developments and research related to high net worth giving. And through the hub, we've launched 2 original research reports based on qualitative research with our members. And the work doesn't stop there. So we're now proactively working with government, regulators, and of course, our guest Rory, who we'll be hearing from in a moment, to make sure that our members' views are represented in all of these policy discussions so that ultimately any key policy developments benefit charities and fundraisers.
Sounds like an amazing project, Philanthropy 2035, hugely ambitious and lots going on. And we'll put all the links to everything that we talk about today, including to the Philanthropy 2035 hub in our show notes. So check those out when you can. It's a fascinating subject, and our guest today is Rory Brooks CBE, board member at the Charity Commission. And he certainly knows a thing or two about philanthropy. And Charlotte, you know him much better than I do. Tell me a bit more about him. So Rory and I met at the National Strategy Working Group for Philanthropy, which brings together all the organisations that are looking to grow high net worth giving. And, you know, from the 18 months that I've gotten to know him, you know, I've seen that he's got some fantastic insights into what philanthropy should be, which I look forward to him elaborating on in our interview. So Charlotte, before we hear from Rory, tell us a little bit more about the state of play today in regard to philanthropy.
Philanthropy is at a critical turning point. The Modern Philanthropist, a report that was created by Barclays and the Beacon Collaborative that came out last year, found that in 2024, high net worth giving reached 11.3 billion. That's up from 8.3 billion in 2020, which really underlines the extent to which this demographic has remained generous despite the economic challenges we've seen since the COVID-19 pandemic, with this very ongoing and indeed cost of giving crisis that we're seeing. And then on top of this, there's then further changes specifically to high net worth giving that we believe have the power to really transform both how donors give and enhance charitable fundraising. So one of the first ones is changing donor demographics. So the intergenerational transfer of wealth will see a new cohort of younger philanthropists coming in who will be looking at how they can generate social impact with their new wealth. And, you know, research indicates that their giving habits are differing from previous generations, both in the causes they prioritize and also how they identify charities that they support. Then on top of that, we have technology, which is having an inevitable impact on both giving habits. For example, we're seeing that large language learning models are making it easier for donors to learn more about the causes they care about. So now they're actually seeking more meaningful conversations with the issues that charities are working on. And as a result, you know, fundraisers really do need to be prepared to have very sophisticated conversations about their organization's mission and impact. And that's just one example. I would recommend that listeners go onto the Philanthropy 2035 Hub and read our report. And then trend number 3, we're seeing that there is, a growing importance in the role of professional advisors and DAFs on the giving journey. And we're now looking at how we can build more empathy and understanding between professional advisors and fundraisers so that they can collaborate better to give more robust supporter journeys to philanthropists. And then we've got the rise of the impact economy. So this is a relatively new economic movement designed to converge social investment, capital, and philanthropy. Once again, I've actually written a blog about this, which members can find more of on the Philanthropy 2035 Hub. And last but certainly not least, the government is now working more to encourage philanthropy. We've got the Department of Culture, Media and Sport, who have launched their place-based giving program. And we are working with the civil servants to help action some of this and making sure that their project is as successful as possible. And then, of course, there is the work of the Charity Commission is doing as a regulator, which I will let Rory talk about a bit more.
Fantastic. Thank you, Charlotte. Some really interesting trends there. And we'll put all the links to the blogs that you've written and everything you mentioned in the show notes, as I've already said. So please do head there if you want to follow up on any of the trends that Charlotte's just been chatting through. And tell me, as lead on Philanthropy 2035 for the Institute, what are your hopes and ambitions in regard to what could be achieved over the next 9 years?
I mean, simply put, we want, I believe that there's really kind of 3 fundamental pillars to a thriving philanthropic environment. And it's that we want to see it growing. So, simply put, we want more high net worths to become philanthropists. We want it to be as impactful as possible. So once again, how do we make sure that, philanthropic capital is being put to its best possible use? And lastly, we want it to be sustainable. So if we've got all of these, incredibly generous donors giving, and we've got all of these incredibly transformational projects making a difference, how do fundraisers get the right resources and investments to sustain those relationships so that this can go on, not just for the next decade, but the decade afterwards? And I'd say that is one of the biggest challenges that we've uncovered from speaking to members, is that many charities really do need to embrace relationship-based fundraising at every level of the organization so that they are ready to, build these longer-term partnerships with donors and funders.
And what can our listeners find, Charlotte, on the Philanthropy 2035 Hub? We've talked about it already, but what's on there for them to help them? And also, how can the Institute in general help them in regards to philanthropy?
So the Hub is really a one-stop shop for members to stay up to date with the latest developments in philanthropy. And there's something on there for everyone, whether you are a charity leader looking more at kind of, some of the strategic policy developments, all the way to fundraisers who are, doing the job day to day and looking for some quick tips and trips. It really does bring together the latest data, research, and of course our own original research reports.
Fantastic. Thanks, Charlotte. Now, our guest today has spent close to 2 decades thinking about philanthropy from every possible angle. Rory Brooks CBE and his wife Elizabeth established their family foundation back in 2005, focusing on social disadvantage, education and the arts. Work that has included chairing the philanthropic board of Manchester University for a decade, hosting poverty summits in South Africa, and serving as trustee or chair of organisations including the Centre for Social Justice and Inter-University. He was the donor member of the Pearce Review into Philanthropy in Higher Education and was awarded the CBE in 2015 for services to philanthropy. Most recently, Rory has taken on a role as a board member of the Charity Commission for England and Wales, giving him a rare vantage point on giving from major donor to regulator. So he has a unique perspective and is the ideal person to welcome on to Let's Talk Fundraising to tell us more about philanthropy and where the sector is heading. Rory, welcome to Let's Talk Fundraising. It's lovely to see you and thank you for joining Charlotte and myself on the show today. We've got plenty to talk about and Charlotte has just given us a great sort of run through of some of the things we'll be talking about throughout this interview. But let's start, if we may, by just looking at the Chartered Institute's research points to a real shift in giving behaviour amongst high net worth individuals. Partly, it says, driven by collaborative sector-wide efforts to encourage it. Now, from where you sit, what's the most significant change you're seeing in how major donors approach giving right now?
Well, first of all, thank you, Tim, and thank you, Charlotte, for the opportunity to talk to you today. And I hope that this discussion proves to be worthwhile for all your participants. I think that philanthropy generally is becoming more visible. it's been one of the great quiet assets of our country, that it goes about its business. It's a very fragmented, slightly incoherent universe of people who are all trying to do good things. But there's been some feeling that some more coherence to that would be a good idea. And I think the big thing one of the big things that's happening is the engagement by government. And I know we're going to try and talk about that a little bit later. But I think it's giving philanthropy some encouragement. I think it's giving the opportunity for philanthropy to have a voice with a bit more coherence. And I think there are a number of, your research probably shows better than I can tell you what some of the motives are, but unquestionably COVID had a big impact on giving. It made quite a lot of grant-making organizations think hard about their rate of distribution, what they were trying to do. There's been some rethinking in the grant-making world and among philanthropists about what their priorities are. Whether we're now living in a sort of post-COVID, what do we do next moment, as I think is a viable question. But I think there's an atmosphere of a bit more confidence and coherence about philanthropy and recognizing the immense degree of social good that it can do.
Excellent. And yes, I think part of that is, of course, the impact economy, which has definitely got opportunities to, once again, to further increase the visibility of philanthropy, as well as, as you've discussed, encouraging, both funders and charities to think a little bit more about kind of measurable, tangible outcomes. From your perspective, what opportunities do you think the impact economy does create for encouraging and enhancing philanthropic giving?
This is one of the great topics of our time, and this whole interview is going to get very precisely dated due to the fact we had somebody win the World Cup last night. We're going to have a new Prime Minister by the time this discussion's over. So this is very intensely topical, dateable moment. I think the impact economy is fundamentally about looking at ways of investing which disaggregate the nature of returns. So philanthropy is about grant making and giving the money back, and all of your return is expressed through the social or public benefit outcomes for which it's intended. Impact financing says where we can provide some capital, we may want the capital back, but we will have some kind of combination of financial return and social return in whatever format that may be. It may be that there's some initial grants made, that they may be recovered by social outcomes. And I think it's a very a vibrant sector, which is, I have to say, still somewhat emerging. And I think that we've got quite a lot of action through the creation of government department with that name and title. But I think that we're moving towards an environment where a wider range of socially contributory activities are at hand, and it's very encouraging to see the government, who I think I have to say have frankly been doing an excellent job on all this, moving towards encouraging these kind of public benefit activities when they're aligned with government missions.
Just wanted to pick up on one thing you mentioned very at the start of that answer, Rory. Obviously, we are, by the time this interview goes out, we will have a new Prime Minister. Any thoughts on where Andy Burnham might take things, or where you like him to take things?
That's a big question you're asking there, and I am going to pretty much duck it entirely. It's not my place or position to give views to what government should do. From the narrower space of what the Charity Commission is trying to do in this area, and for what philanthropy and philanthropists, I think we are profoundly supportive of the government continuing its exercise of engagement, which I think is extremely welcome. And it's a bit like climbing a mountain. A lot of the mountain has been climbed. We just haven't quite planted enough flags yet. So we just hope that this government will continue. And there are signs already that after a bit of a lull, waiting for things to happen, that people are recommitting to this right now. And we've had a reorganization within DCMS, for example, with a further commitment to the philanthropic and impact capital space. So I'm not doing an ask, but we more of the same, please, I think is what we would like in this sector.
Absolutely. And I would echo that, Rory, from the Chartered Institute's perspective, is that I'm actually quietly confident because Andy Burnham has been very pro-charity on record. He's been on record of being very pro-charity. He actually supported our campaign, Never More Needed, back in COVID-19. And also from some of the work that he's been doing in Manchester with kind of coalition building within the social impact sector, we've seen that his some of the stuff he's already done very much aligns with, the fundamental principles of the impact economy and the trajectory that the government's going on now. So whilst, we can't predict the future, I'm cautiously optimistic that things will continue continue kind of on the up.
Thank you, Charlotte. Like you, I'm an inherently optimistic person. And if we can just sustain the direction of travel, that would be terrific.
Fingers crossed. Sounds good. Now, Rory, you've been doing this for decades now. Over that time, what's changed more, or what do you think has changed more, the mindset of major donors or the whole sort of infrastructure around giving? What do you think's changed more?
I hope you said I've been doing it for decades, not 4 decades. So 2 decades seems quite a long time to me, and quite enough. In fact, we had the 20th anniversary. To our surprise, we had the 20th anniversary of our foundation late last year. I think the philanthropic world has been through various iterations. First of all, there was measuring outputs, then there was measuring inputs, then there was measuring impact, then there was altruism, and now we're into trust-based philanthropy. What I think is very encouraging is that each new generation of philanthropy is owning the subject for itself, redefining how it operates, thinking about the parameters that they think works for them. And I've spent quite a lot of time with various cohorts of next generation philanthropists, and I'm deeply encouraged about their commitment, their engagement, and that they want to take on the mantle of this responsibility with a fresh impression of what the new needs and requirements of society are. So I think it's evolved quite a lot. I still think we have some distance to go. I don't think that philanthropy is as yet the nationally accepted household word that it should be. And a lot of what is going on through the National Strategy Working Group and through the Office of the Impact Economy is to make philanthropy more a part of the national conversation and to give some understanding of over many years the impact that it's had upon our society.
Fantastic. And you mentioned your foundation. Do you mind telling us a little bit about that? And it's your 20 years, is that right? Is that right?
Yes, 20 years. It hardly seems possible. I think the philanthropists come in sort of 2 kind of breeds. I mean, first of all, you do need some capacity, but those who are, get to it because they have a mission. They're very clear about what they want to do and what they want to achieve. And some of that is based upon family experience. Sometimes it's illness or some other experience of a family. And there are others who say, I have capacity, but I don't quite yet know what I want to do. And we've, my wife Elizabeth and I have fallen somewhat into that second camp. And it's slightly harder if you don't know at day one what your mission is. And I would just encourage everybody to enjoy the journey of exploration, about lifting the lid on a few things and seeing what eventually the resonates. You can be very analytical about this, but when it's all said and done, your heart also has to say, actually, I think this is the right thing to do. And getting that balance right, I think is terrifically important. We for our 20s, we did a couple of little things. One was we don't think that there's enough good stories out there about philanthropy. And so we rang up a man we know well who's brilliant at this called Rory Davis. Charlotte knows a little bit about this already. And we're going to launch a site with about 20 stories, which are going to be open access, open source, which Rory has researched for us. We're going to launch that in October. And that will be a live site where we'll take new and fresh stories, because we're surprisingly short of talking about what has actually worked. And the beauty of these stories is that we've got stories from all 4 nations of the Union. We've got some incredibly large, highly structured gifts, and we've got some completely serendipitous, I met them in a train carriage and it changed my point of view of things. So there's something for everybody in there, and they're large and small. And I think it's really important that we remember that there is a golden thread that runs through this. There's a sense of moral purpose, if I can put it that way, from the smallest action, helping somebody across the street, making that phone call to a friend, to Bill Gates, who's trying to rid the world of disease. It's the same fundamental underlying purpose, which is you want to make the world just a little bit better, no matter how small, how large, and we all do it according to the capacity that we can.
Really interesting what you were saying about storytelling, and I'm looking forward to looking at your examples. Do you think, as someone who spent a large amount of his working career writing case studies and researching case studies for the organisations that I've worked for, why is it that charities are reluctant often to reach out to high net worth individuals and ask them to share their stories?
I think they're better than we sometimes give them credit for, actually. But we're always asking for improvement. I think charities are getting less shy. We're quite cautious about talking about money, generally modest about it. And I think we're getting a little less shy and reframing the conversations through need and opportunity as opposed to through quantums of money. Because if you've established the need and the purpose, and you've established the opportunity that might give to somebody to fulfill their role in that purpose, recognizing that funders are enablers, they don't own projects. We are part of a machine, and the charities are the machinery that get it executed. And I think that if we frame it more like that, saying, gosh, I need £1 million, is a better way to put it through the social need and through the public benefit test and through what might appeal to a donor.
Absolutely. And I would just add to that and say that I think whilst, I think charities are doing their best to kind of, talk about their impact, but we are struggling with a bit of a visibility challenge at the moment within the sector. And it was actually interesting. I was reading the Charity Commission's public trust report only the other day, and we're seeing that the proportion of people who could recall a story in the media about charities is falling. What was also interesting was that those that did recall it were more likely to say that actually it was giving them a positive view of the sector. So what we're seeing is that potentially there has been a kind of slight shift in the media narrative around charities and philanthropy. But once again, whether it really is now a question of just how do we make sure that we're getting more of those stories out, and that we're really kind of breaking through what is a very busy news cycle and a very, very crowded digital space. But I was just thinking a little bit about what you were saying there, Rory, about you have to be very analytical, but at the end of the day, your heart also has to kind of come on board too. And it got me thinking about the intergenerational transfer of wealth, because there are new philanthropists who are much younger coming, who are now looking at how they want to generate impact. And there's going to be more coming in the future. I mean, from what from the engagement you've done with various different philanthropists, have you seen kind of any differences in this new generation of philanthropists, or would you say that the fundamental principles remain the same?
I think the principles remain the same. I think the issues they're trying to address are changing on a generational basis. And I think, I think each generation has seen the world through a certain lens and seen the problems through a certain lens, and so has adapted their giving to what they perceive to be the issues of the day. Let's go back to where we are. Charity is in law and through the Commission. Public benefit is statutorily defined, and the Charity Commission is the guardian of the definition of public benefit. So there are some quite firm rail lines here about what constitutes philanthropically and therefore mostly tax advantage money, what use it can be put to. So, but within that, there's quite a wide range of public benefits. And as you know, in England and Wales alone, there are 170,000 charities. So it's clearly not an inhibitor. It's just giving some guide rails about what is a society appropriately says is a public benefit activity. It's just a question of how donors from generation to generation oscillate within the defined public benefit as to where they place their money from each generation. I mean, clearly we have a generation which is much further down the road on addressing climate change than my generation was when we started.
Does that make it a challenge for charities in terms of reaching out to those to different generations in terms of it might just be, especially sort of small to medium-sized charities might not have a huge resource in terms of dedicated fundraisers in regards to philanthropy, but do they have to be multi-skilled now and have the experience and knowledge to be able to reach out to different generations and to different types of philanthropists?
Well, I really, Tim, I'm not sure I really have a full answer to that. I mean, clearly scale is important, and the bigger charities clearly have more capacity, but small charities with a well thought out proposition, we know that they can do well and thrive without necessarily having to sustain massive growth. But they move from project to project. They can put together a good story, compelling story that will appeal to the right number of people. And it can be a challenging and frustrating business. So fundraising, but you've just got to keep on. You just got to keep on going. Quite a lot of my early work was with the 10, 15 years ago was with the Pearce Review, which looked into the universities and the higher educational sector getting involved in philanthropic fundraising. And, a lot of work done within that report was how should you as a university go out and raise money? So it was a sort of textbook for what is the mechanism for raising money? What do you know? What skills and resources do you need? The good news is that there are always going to be some development departments who are better than others, but plus or minus a bit, the more resource you throw at this, the more money you're going to raise. The bad things are, don't stop. If you don't be inconsistent, don't say, I'm going to do it for 3 years, then we're going to ignore it for 2, because that will alienate donors and people get a track record for saying, we're not sure you're consistent about this. But 10 years later, there's a report done by the Moore Partnership showed that in real terms, twice as much money was going to universities as at the time that report was made, and indeed at the end of the match giving program done by that government. So we know that resource building works, and I hope that I'm not saying anything that's controversial to Charlotte, to what you and your organisation do.
No, absolutely. I think we very much share that view as well, is that at the moment, the more that you put in terms of buy-in, and that's it. Once again, it can be both investment into your fundraisers and to making sure that they've got the tools and the resources, but sometimes it is just as simple as more strategic buy-in across the organization. So making sure that senior volunteers and trustees understand that they also play a part in creating a positive giving experience for donors, all the way through to kind of, if there's experts who are really, really passionate about what they do, if they can go and meet with some of these donors and just share their enthusiasm for the thing that both parties really care about, that can be the difference between a one-off gift or a really truly transformational partnership. And so I think Rory and I, we've talked about this before, there needs to be better giving, but certainly now is also the time for charities to really step up and focus on better fundraising.
Yes, absolutely. Over 20 years, I think I've become a more experienced and more knowing philanthropist, and I know that there's tons more to learn. It's a practice, it's a sort of craft, it's a trade, and that improves with time and experience. So I think we're getting better at knowing how to give better, and we also need to keep improving on how we receive money better. And the better they can be done on both sides, the more sustained long-term philanthropic relationships you're going to have, and the more security of funding you have for meeting the needs that whatever the charity is trying to meet.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, Rory, you champion philanthropy both as a board member of the regulator, but also through other initiatives as well, which we've touched on. What would you say your main goals and priorities are right now?
Well, I think in respect of the Commission, so let's do the very basics. The Charity Commission for England and Wales is the registrar and regulator of charities in England and Wales. So its job is registration and to make sure that charities meet the public benefits tests and they exercise their duty appropriately. It is a regulator. It's not always going to be hugely popular, but it is also there to encourage a flourishing civil society and to build public trust and confidence in charities. So we're also a supporter and a promoter. And I have to say, if you look at what the Commission's been doing in terms of its amendments to existing guidances and new guidances, quite a lot of that is with an eye and an ear to what do donors need to be able to give more, because I think the underlying feeling, Commission, the reason why the post I occupy exists, was that we need more fuel in the system, which is more money to come through, and we need to promote the famous strapline, more and better philanthropy. The Commission is also undergoing a very significant overhaul of itself. It's going to become obviously more IT and data focused. It's an incredible database that it's got, which is only used for, quite rightly, for compliance purposes, but there's a wealth of information and data which can be put to better use, and we can use more modern technology to be a bit more predictive about charities that may or may not be as compliant as we would like them to be. So I think with the Commission's point of view, I'm incredibly grateful to have the post, because it allows me to go out and promote philanthropy. I think that the keeping going with the National Strategy Working Group, encouraging the Office of the Impact Economy to be successful and be very well defined and execute its mission. It's in its early stages, so it's still working out exactly how to get there, and to have a slightly more coherent voice of philanthropy. One of the questions I was asked at the beginning was, the Commission would say, Rory, what does philanthropy think about X? And I realized I'd have to make about 300 phone calls to get to an answer, and I'd have 290 different views. So having, which is great, and philanthropy is a great crowd of people. They're imaginative, they're well-directed, they have public interest at their heart, but everybody's got their own opinions. It's highly fragmented, and I think there is a place for a more representative voice for philanthropy. So when the governments, in incredibly quick time, set up the Office of the Impact Economy, the question prior to them was, philanthropists going, who do we talk to in government? And when as soon as that office was set up, we realized that the question was going to turn itself around, and the government, through OIE and other areas, was going to say, who do we now talk to in philanthropy? So there's the National Strategy Working Group, and with CAF and with, in particular, Kath Dovey as well, I was asked to chair a new group called the Philanthropist Reference Group, which is about 12 to 15 philanthropists, which was the answer to the question, if you, government, want to talk to somebody, here's a body we can talk to. It has no form, there's no budget. I'm grateful to CAF for providing the secretariat to all that. But that and NSWG and one of the two other things that are going on may yet be the kernel of something that forms to be a more representative body. It mustn't be a bottleneck. It must be a facilitator and a communicator. But it'd be better if we can do a better job of telling the good story about philanthropy. And most of it goes right. Some of it doesn't always go right. It's a practice like everything else, and sometimes the mission isn't accomplished. But I think so. Therefore, I think finally, a slightly more coherent voice to speak for philanthropy, both to government and to the nation.
Absolutely. And just to touch very basically on the NSWG, so that's the National Strategy Working Group. So that's actually how you and I met, Rory. Mm-hmm. So the Chartered Institute is also on that working group. So we've been, facilitating and supporting the creation of the National Strategy, which we are very grateful to CAF for putting together, and really pleased to see that they've, taken forward several of our members' policy asks within that document. And then, on top of that, there is now a new subgroup that we are both on within that group, which is the communications one, which at the moment is still very early stages. But I will just say to any members listening, watch this space, because we are joining forces right now, the other infrastructure bodies, alongside Rory and his work, to really try and see what we can do about, addressing some of those visibility issues that I was mentioning earlier.
Thank you, Charlotte. We're very much in harness on all this. The other point about these efforts is that, and certainly for the Philanthropist Reference Group, they represent all 4 nations of the United Kingdom, and as do the stories in the Giving Project, by the way. It's very important this becomes a UK project as opposed to an England project. There are some challenges there because some London-based ministries they're devolved powers, so you've got to go and talk to different parties. But we have there's terrific philanthropic experience, not just in England, not just in London, but in Scotland, with a fine record, some outstanding long-term philanthropy in Northern Ireland, and Wales, where there are 2 or 3 really outstanding foundations operating. So the history is across the United Kingdom. We want to make sure we represent the whole of the nation in that.
One of the things that you mentioned earlier, Rory, is that, of course, the Charity Commission is a regulator, and, your role is to oversee and make sure that there is good governance across the sector. From a kind of more practical perspective, in your experience, is there a kind of link between good governance within a charity and a donor's confidence to give?
I think there's an axiomatic link. I mean, I think if let's put the question the other way around. If you have doubts and don't trust the management of the party you're going to give to, are you going to give them money? I mean, I started out as a lending banker, and one of the things was, do the numbers stack up, and can you trust the people you're giving the money to? And I think that applies equally in philanthropy. So I think that good, honest governance is terrifically important. Most people realize that organizations end up being quite complicated, and things happen from the outside world which aren't always plan A. And it's very important that charities, businesses, universities, anybody report back the good, the bad, and sometimes the ugly, so that those stories are shared and not hidden. So what's the old story? Good news should travel fast, and bad news should travel a bit faster. Just so, and that represents a mature philanthropic and funding relationship, and charities are right to be able to make the most of the successes and the numbers that they've got and the case they've helped. And occasionally they have to turn around and say, this didn't go according to plan, and we're having a rethink. And the honesty and openness is a part of good governance.
And we can ask you, as someone who's been on the receiving end of fundraising asks in the past, what's the one thing that you wish more fundraisers understood about the art of asking, or that perhaps they get wrong most frequently?
I'm a little less experienced at this than you might think, because we're a non-solicitation foundation, and so we don't get quite as much as we used to. One thing, it's a slight deviation from your question. One thing we have noticed, and the Commission's taken notice of this too, is a very large increase in the amount of applications for funding that are being received. And it's very obvious that a lot of these are AI generated. And it's clogging the system a bit, and is causing, with each new technology, there's a certain settling down period. But the charities think we're getting a lower hit rate on the total number of applications they're sending out, despite the fact that some of them are AI. Grant-making foundations are receiving a flood more applications. They can't quite, in the early stages, sort out which are the real ones and which are the generated ones. And so there's a bit of there's a lot of noise in the system around that at the moment, and it's slightly confusing the grant-making environment on top of all the other things that are going on, which is, what there appears to be expanded or has recently been expanding demand for charitable needs, etc. So that it's not quite the question you asked. I think understanding your people and asking the right questions. I mean, obviously, we occasionally get approached, but people who understand what we do are obviously more likely on track. I do think that it's difficult if you are a solicitation house, because you get thousands of applications. But those of us who are not, and there's many like that's a quiet thank you but no thank you, we're either fully committed or this is not what we're doing, it doesn't do any harm because it helps the person who's written in all honesty and care get a better sense of direction of what they're doing. So some courtesy in this, I think, is quite helpful.
Is it fair to say as well that if the number of applications is exponentially increasing as a result of people just using AI to write those applications, is the rule of thumb still the fact that a well-written, personalized, well thought through, non-AI generated application is always going to be better than one that is AI generated?
I'm almost inclined to put that question to Charlotte, actually, but I think I would think so. I mean, we're all impressed with how representative AI can be, and it's clearly going to get better at that. But if you look at the introduction of previous technologies, it just takes a little while to get ourselves sorted out into what the new normal looks like, and we're clearly not quite there yet. So we've got a lot of noise, a lot of chaff coming into the system. We'll have to do better at sorting it out, but it will make foundations think even more closely about what it is that they really want to try and do and achieve, I think.
Absolutely. And yeah, I mean, I'm happy to jump in on the AI because actually, when I'm not thinking about Philanthropy 2035, I'm actually writing our AI guidance at the moment. And so it's something that I've been thinking about a lot in terms of, what does it mean? What are the different tools that are out there? How can they enhance fundraising? And more importantly, what should a fundraiser be thinking about day to day as they are using AI to make sure that they're using it, not just compliantly and, which is obviously very important, but also making sure that they're, using it to its full potential and not using it to kind of once again dilute or actually what's kind of compromise on the kind of authenticity of their work. And I'll be honest, I have a very open view when it comes to AI. I say that it's a tool, and it's how well you know how to use the tool that is going to decide whether or not the outcome is best. And I always use this example. I don't see it that differently to a hammer. I personally, if you can use a hammer to build a bookshelf, but if you don't know how to build the bookshelf properly, it really doesn't matter what kind of hammer you use. I see it the same way with AI, is that at the end of the day, it's not going to replace good fundraisers. It's only going to make them better at their jobs.
I have nothing to add. Good for tackling that.
Yeah, well done.
So for charities that have never really engaged a major donor before, what would you say is the single biggest mistake that they can make?
I think that understanding where the donor is and getting to know what the donor's missions are, and that can be quite institutionalized in some cases and very personal in others, is quite helpful. It is very helpful and important. So making sure that they what they think they're asking for is aligned with what they can reasonably find out about what the donor is doing in their activities. And obviously, some donors are more defined than others, and that's always challenging if it looks like it's a bit all over the place. But I think approaching it through some sense of mutual respect and trying to understand in advance or inquire in advance about what works for a donor and what doesn't, so that the conversation doesn't head down a route which is obviously negative for the donor and the asker hasn't really figured that out yet. And that's wasting time on both sides, and ultimately is debilitating for the person doing the asking.
And we're coming towards the end of our time, Rory, but we've talked a lot in this episode about Philanthropy 2035. If you look ahead to 2035, look down the road, what does a healthy, trusted philanthropic sector in the UK actually look like for you?
Oh, that's so the easy ones at the end, is it?
Yeah.
So 2035, for me, that's quite a long way down the road. I would like to see a more philanthropy, more and better philanthropy. That's my strapline, actually, for all these activities, more and better philanthropy. So what does that look like? Well, more is clearly more, which means more people engage. There's some worrying evidence out there in the short term that we're giving more, but off a narrower base of donors. We need to change that. So we need to change the expectations and ideas across a broader donor base. We all know that what in financial markets are called narrow tops are quite fragile. So getting that story out about philanthropy being good for you, making it less intimidating, making it easily accessible, making it a normal thing to do as opposed to some odd thing that we don't know how to spell properly, is important. I think a more coherent understanding of philanthropy, yet more coherent understanding of philanthropy and impact financing in government, so that is a smooth, well-oiled machine that works, that the government knows which part of its missions are susceptible to philanthropy, what kind of risks it's prepared to take, that philanthropists know who to talk to in government, so that no longer becomes some kind of people shouting at each other from opposite sides of the riverbank, but actually is a well-oiled machine that works properly. And I'd like to see philanthropy being a normal part of the national conversation. It's not as lonely as it was by any means, or else we wouldn't be having this kind of conversation. But it's still not as familiar as it needs to be, and it needs to be more accepted. And people, when you talk about what you do, I practice philanthropy, still don't quite know how to address that. They don't know how to engage in a conversation. And I'm not sure this line will be on your podcast, but it's still easier around the dinner table to talk about prostate cancer than it is to talk about philanthropy. And we should be able to talk about both. So everybody needs to learn more. And donors also need to learn more and enjoy their journey. I think much better support for the philanthropic journey is also required. We need more of the really good advisors, more groups like your own to help support people so that there is support along this journey. It's not the lonely path that it used to be. It's a shared journey with ample experience. And the National Strategy Working Group has lots of recommendations about smoothing out the environment for philanthropy, making it more accessible, making it easier to do. Meanwhile, we need to work on the climate of philanthropy with its public perception, the slightly negative way we think about it. And we need to win the battle of ideas. There's some ideas out there that are parties that are anti-philanthropy. I think we have good arguments for that. They're most of the arguments about philanthropy conducted other than here, mostly in the United States. And there are also arguments fundamentally about wealth, which is a political argument, as opposed to about philanthropy, which is a charitable argument.
Absolutely. And I totally echo what you were saying about, the goal for the next 10 years philanthropy is more giving and better giving. And on top of that, though, it's only possible, however, if we also have better fundraising. And I think that's the main thing that we really want charities to understand right now is that, the tides really are turning in the sector's favor. We are seeing that more and more people want to encourage philanthropy and charitable giving. But to make the charities that are going to make the most of those opportunities are really the ones that have set themselves up for success and understand the importance of building and maintaining these, long-term trusted relationships with their donors and funders. And so with that, Rory, the last question that we have for you is, what would be that one piece of advice that you would give to a fundraiser today who's trying to build a genuine long-term relationship with a major donor as opposed to just chasing that one-off gift?
First of all, don't chase a one-off gift. Try and create a program. Try to make sure that all your organization is facing the right way, from the trustees down to the volunteers, that everybody understands the role that the giving to the institute, to the entity of the charity is all about. Feelings, find yourself in a position where you're feeling supported by your management and trustees who are on side and understand what you're trying to do. I think this is a lot of this comes out of my experience with universities, is make this a whole institution project, not just you on your own going off and doing stuff and not everybody understanding it very well. If proper fundraising is integrated throughout the organization so that everybody understands the task of the fundraiser, it'll make the fundraiser's job a lot easier. And if you're chasing one donor, you're not chasing enough donors. Go out and go and chase some more, because you're not going to get a hit. You need a decent hit rate. So I think making sure you do the best you can to feel that what you're doing is an integrated part of the organization's activities. How does that sound to you?
Excellent. Fantastic.
Thank you, Rory. Thank you so much for joining us. It's been an absolutely fascinating conversation. And I think if you could just have a look at your diary, we'll book you back in for 2035 and we can just reflect on it. Since we're now finished the interview, I hope to be in somnolent retirement by the time I get to 2035. It begins. I'm over 80 then, so I hope that's 2035. I can look back with satisfaction and joy, not so much joy, upon a flourishing civil society with a properly philanthropically funded set of activity, well regulated by an expert charity commission called the Charity Commission of England and Wales. Fantastic. Rory, thank you very much. This is the part of the show where we take a look at some of the things making headlines in the fundraising world at the moment. And to start us off, earlier this year, the fundraising regulator announced its research partnership with BMG Research Limited, which will look at fundraising complaints received by charities between April 2026 and March 2027. BMG has now started contacting a large sample of fundraising charities registered with the regulator as levy payers to invite them to take part. The research will help the sector better understand complaint trends, identify where fundraising approaches may be causing concern, and support learning across the sector. The data will be submitted to the fundraising regulator anonymously, and they will not know which charities have participated in the research. So please look out for this email from BMG and take part in this really valuable piece of research.
New research from the fundraising regulator in partnership with Opinium points to encouraging improvements in the public's experiences of charitable fundraising, presenting a clear link between the positive experience and greater willingness to keep supporting charities. Almost 2/3 of people surveyed reported a positive experience with charities over the past 12 months. And crucially, trust in charity fundraisers themselves has held steady, placing real weight on the quality of frontline fundraising interactions. Here's Claire Stanley, Director of Policy and Communications at the Chartered Institute, with more.
The recent research from the fundraising regulator and Opinium highlights the overall positive attitude towards charities across the country. Public fundraising is a vital income stream for charities, with door-to-door in particular bringing in the highest number of new regular givers in recent years. So it's extremely encouraging to hear that more people are reporting positive experiences of this fundraising method. We want to continue this upward trajectory and keep making improvements so that more members of the public have good experiences when they engage with charities. We've been working closely with our public fundraising members over the past 2 years to create new partnerships guidance and our recently introduced training modules on public fundraising. And we're currently developing the next set of on-demand modules to ensure that we can create a gold standard in fundraising training, compliance and practice. All of this has been done in partnership with our public fundraising members who want to deliver the best service possible.
And that's a wrap for episode 7 of Let's Talk Fundraising. A huge thank you to Charlotte for co-hosting once again with me today, and to Rory Brooks, of course, for giving us such a brilliant insight into the state of philanthropy today. I think there's some real hope for the future there, Charlotte. What do you think?
Absolutely. I mean, it was just such a privilege to have him on here. Like I said, we've kind of, he and I have spoken at various meetings and working groups, and it's so nice to kind of finally be able to show some of our members what those discussions look like, and the sector really is on charity's side right now. So now the next stop is just better giving and even better fundraising.
Excellent. We should put that on a t-shirt. I think that's definite slogan territory.
Yeah.
Now, if today's episode has inspired you and you want to know more about the future of philanthropy, don't forget that the Chartered Institute's Philanthropy 2035 Hub is there for you. You'll find the link to it in the show notes. And of course, we want to hear from you too. Did our conversation with Rory today strike a chord with you? How are you finding things with your high net worth supporters at the moment? Have you got some tips or advice that can help others? You can send us a voice note or drop us an email to tell us all about it. All the details, as ever, are in the show notes. And of course, if you're enjoying Let's Talk Fundraising, please do take a moment to give us a follow and a 5-star rating on whatever platform you're listening on. It really does make a difference and helps other fundraisers to find us. We'll be back in a month's time with the next episode. So until then, take care.